that you can't say about Paul Skeens is that he's a surprise. I'm going to talk about the best surprise this baseball club's experienced this summer. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Pirates. Comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into football and or hockey. I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Penguins in the same place that you found this. Pirates 10. You heard me right. Dodgers 6 last night at PNC Park. It wasn't just Skeens stealing the show. In fact, unless you want to give Skeens credit for the remarkable offensive support that he has somehow received every time out, it really was about the guys with the bats, specifically in a 7-run, again, you heard me right, second inning. No, I don't care that it all came on a whole bunch of singles and that the Dodgers were messing things up. Offense is offense, and with this team, you can't be getting greedy. 2 hits each from Edward Olivares, Ke'Bryan Hayes, and in what's quickly becoming kind of expected, Nick Gonzales as well. He'd go 2 for 3 with a walk and 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 RBIs. Since in the 23 games since his promotion from AAA Indianapolis, Gonzales is slashing 310, 355, and 500, all of them by far the best marks on the team. In his 84 at-bats, he's got 3 home runs, 9 extra base hits, only 22 strikeouts, which is really significant for him, and I'll get to that, 5 walks, and 20 RBIs. Don't be extrapolating what 20 RBIs in 23 games translates to over a full season, because that would be silly. But it's impressive in its own context. The kids looked really good, and what matters more, I think, is that he's looked really good in the calendar year 2024, meaning he had a strong spring training. Derek Shelton's acknowledged that he easily could have made the roster to open the season, but instead he went to Indianapolis to try to continue working on the stuff that he'd put into play in the offseason. And he went to Indy and just kept looking like the same player, actually a lot better because he was going against minor league pitching. Still wasn't striking out, still wasn't swinging and missing, still was going at his pitch, and still was making really solid contact, which is what Gonzales was supposed to be all about, you'll recall, when he was a first-round pick. So what happened? What changed? Since we're always looking for somebody to credit or to blame, Gonzales himself has described how entering the winter, he worked himself at looking at video, at trying to figure out what went wrong, particularly when it came to those swings and misses. And what he came up with was that he'd raise his hands a little bit in the box, he'd hold the bat back a little bit, and he'd make sure for launch angle purposes that he'd be swinging on a bit more of an incline that he had in the past, and that's it. I've talked to the kid myself about this. He knows what he did. He knows that he did it, and he knows, I mean, this is one really confident young man, that it's working, and he expects it to continue to work. Why? Well, because as he explained to me a week ago in Detroit, his bat's staying in the swinging zone a little bit longer. If that sounds like too much inside baseball for you, then think of it this way. Think of the path that the bat has to travel from the time you begin the swing to the time it makes contact with the ball or doesn't. If you begin with your hands higher or your hands further back, it's got farther to travel in terms of distance. Now, Gonzales has never been a guy with what's known as a long swing in baseball, so he felt like he had some of his compactness that he could forfeit in this process. He did forfeit some of it. He didn't lose any of his natural strength or quick wrists, and the gamble paid off all around because he is keeping that bat and that longer swing in that zone so that he can make the necessary adjustments as the ball is coming from the pitcher. He was asked after his performance last night if the game has just kind of slowed down for him this year.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, when you first came up last year especially, the game kind of moved a little fast. I don't even remember, too much of being up here a lot. I just kind of sped through things. So being able to slow it down a little bit this year, and obviously, just the adjustments that I made are kind of helping slow down the game a little bit.
Look, my friends, almost everything has gone wrong with this offense this season. And the amount of help that the Pirates have gotten toward that end from the minor leagues has been negligible. But Gonzales has been terrific, and it's okay to spotlight when somebody stands out as he has. Good for him, better for the Pirates. When we come back, J1Q. This portion of Daily Shot of Pirates is brought to you by our friends at North Shore Tavern. That's directly across Federal Street from PNC Park. It's home of Steak on a Stone, an eating experience, underscoring the word experience. The steak is brought to you partially cooked on an 800-degree stone, and you do the rest. It's a ton of fun, it's a great meal, and it's a baseball atmosphere like no other in Pittsburgh. North Shore Tavern, right across Federal Street from PNC Park. Today's J1Q comes from my man, Joey Wagner, who says, Mr. DK, he knows I only let him do that. Nobody else gets away with a mister. Has a pitcher on the Pirates in franchise history ever had the kind of stuff that Paul Skeens has? Joey, I could get a good laugh out of this by pointing out that Skeens didn't even have the best stuff of any Pirates pitcher on this night, okay? Because Aroldis Chapman came along and took Skeens' 101 and raised him to a 104. That's some pretty rare air all around, never mind that happening on the same evening. I'm going to take your question and limit it to starting pitchers, because when you're talking about relief, you can be talking about someone who throws nothing other than fastballs, who could get away with having nothing other than heat. So I could go back, this is about a decade and change, to a Rule 5 pick named Donnie Veal. He was a lefty who was capable of throwing 105. 105. Had no idea where it was going, but the gun didn't lie. 105. So do you want to factor him into this discussion? Do you want to ignore him because nothing came of him? Do you want to throw in every other Nick Birdie who came along and was hitting 100? No, you probably don't. So if we limit this just to starting pitchers, because you're going to have to be able to throw more than a different pitch or two in a starting role, from a stuff standpoint, you're probably looking at Skeens versus Garrett Cole and not really anybody else that we could reasonably track. Remember, Joe, that it's only been about 20 years now that Major League Baseball's had advanced data to go with its advanced analysis. We weren't able to time pitches, at least not on any consistent level. We weren't able to track things like vertical break, spin rate, any of that. So what we would have to do to properly answer your question is to go back over 143 years of history and ask ourselves, is there even a pitcher who had that reputation, who was written about in such a way? I'm going to give you an example here to keep this real. Bob Feller, way before your time, before my time, legendary Hall of Famer, pitched for Cleveland and was reputed to be throwing 100 miles an hour, back at a time when nobody was doing that. Many, many years later, Nolan Ryan had a reputation for throwing about that hard. There have been others along the way that weren't anywhere near as accomplished as those two, but not one of them, and I say this with respect to the entire body of pitching in franchise history, not one of them was in Pittsburgh. When you talk about the best overall starting pitchers in franchise history, there really wasn't one for the first half century, believe it or not. Great teams, but they were built on the bats. Bob Friend, Vernon Law, reliable, durable, tough, not what you would put into that category. When you get to the 3 World Series in 1960, 1971, and 1979, the best overall pitcher of that era was John Candelaria, the lanky lefty. He wasn't a flamethrower either. So, Joe, if you're asking about stuff, you might just be talking about velocity. You might be talking about an overall pitch mix. But there's nobody who touches Skeens. Nobody. I purposely took the long route to lay this out because, yes, we can become caught up in the now and we can too casually dismiss the past, or especially the distant past. There's nobody like Skeens who's ever pitched for this organization. Cole, had he been here and had the front office at the time not been idiots and asked him to pitch to contact instead of trying to strike people out, Cole could have easily put himself into that category as, possibly the best pitcher in franchise history. That's a conversation he and I had once. But I'm fairly confident that Cole, in watching Skeens right now, would tell you the same thing that I am. There's nobody like this. There's nobody like this. There's nobody who can combine this insane velocity with everything else that Skeens brings, plus his control, plus his poise, plus his fearlessness. Joey, did you see him against Shohei Ohtani last night? Yeah, Ohtani got him once. But man, how about the K, right? I appreciate the question. I appreciate you, Joe. I appreciate everybody who listens to Daily Shot of Pirates, and we're going to do another one of these tomorrow.